Hi, everyone. We have an amazing lineup for you for Black History Month. Y'all, we have some of the most dynamic, bold, and courageous Black female elected leaders in the country. We are so excited to have Congresswoman Summer Lee with us, to have Mayor Aaliyah Gaskins from Alexandria, and of course, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who we helped get elected. I want to tell you about a little bit about these three women and how fortunate we are to have them here and representing Americans across the country. So Congresswoman Summer Lee is a dedicated organizer, attorney, and progressive leader. She was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for Pennsylvania's 12th district in 2022, and she's been a firebrand ever since. And she became the first Black woman ever elected to Congress from Western Pennsylvania, and we are so proud to have her with us here, and proud to have endorsed her in her work as well. And we have a Congresswoman, Jennifer McClellan, a progressive legislator who has always worked to ensure Virginia's voices are heard through her 18 sessions in Virginia's General Assembly and in Congress since her election in 2023. And we have Mayor Aaliyah Gaskins, who is a tenacious fighter for families, communities, and health equity. She was elected in 2024. She is the first African-American woman to serve as the mayor of Alexandria. So I am so glad to have you all here with us. So grateful for the work you do. And also as NextGen, an organization that mobilizes young people to vote, we know that so many young people were critical to you winning your elections. And that you have worked hard to represent the interests of young people. But I wanted to start with Mayor Gaskins, who in 2024, who had this historic win for Black candidates at, for you, but also we saw at the local and national level. And you've only been in office for a short time period, but I'm wondering, what are you proud to be bringing to this role, and specifically how you try and represent your home community of Alexandria, Virginia?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really grateful to NextGen for the invitation, but also to be on this panel with two women that I admire. Representative Lee, I don't know if you know this, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh, a Western Pennsylvania native. And then I know Congresswoman McClellan. So many of the things that you have done throughout your time in the General Assembly are directly impacting the lives of Alexandria residents, and the work you continue to do make sure that we keep Virginia strong and a progressive place. In terms of sort of what I'm most excited about and what I'm bringing to the role, as was said, I was elected this past November. I have been Alexandria's mayor for all about a month and a few weeks, and the first Black woman to hold that role in our city's 275-year history. I think what I bring is a fresh energy to the problems that we face. I bring a new perspective, not only as a Black woman, but also I'm a young mom. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. My background is in public health and urban planning, so a new perspective on how we look at and approach issues. And I think lastly, the thing that is most important and I think exciting to me in this role is I bring an intentional focus on making sure that our city works for more of us. I am one of the 57% of renters in our community. My husband and I work over 4 jobs in order to be able to live here and stay here. We ride the bus. We move around the city just like other residents in our community. And so the challenges that residents face, we face those directly too. And being able to speak to that has been, I think, an essential piece of my role and the leadership that I'm bringing to the office.
Thank you so much. And I love Mayor Gaskin's story, and also someone that truly represents and lives the interests of working and middle-class families, because that is such a unique perspective to bring to elected office, as we know, especially when we turn and talk about Congress. So both Congresswomen Lee and McClellan became the first Black women in their respective districts to serve in Congress. This is modern Black history for all of us and in the making. And I'm wondering for each of you, what you think it means to see Black representation in elected office, and especially in Congress, and how you try, obviously you represent everyone in your district, but also the unique perspective you bring as Black women in Congress and how you try and honor and hold that. And we can start with Representative Lee.
I was about to say, are we going to go in seniority order? I saw Jen just waiting there for the seniority order hit. I appreciate that. But hey, everybody! It's so first of all, it's just so good to be with you all. You know, in these days, it's like we want to be with the people who are moving, who are shaking, and who aren't stagnant. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to convene here and to talk about this during this Black History Month, right? And precisely when attacks on Black history, attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, attacks on all of our marginalized communities are stronger than we've ever seen. It's a time where we got to get ready, stay ready. And let me just say, both me and Jen are both not just the first Black women for our districts, we're the first Black women for our entire states. And put in that perspective, like Pennsylvania, Virginia, both incredibly old states. We are not new states. So we're talking about over the hundreds of years of Congress that these states in 2022 finally sent Black women to represent them, finally sent a diversity of perspective. And I think about that with the DEI, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, is because what we try to let people know is it's not that we're just Black women, is that we also have different lived experiences. I grew up Black, I grew up working class, and I grew up in a neighborhood that's not accustomed to having people represent you in Congress or any level of government. I think about Black people who grew up not knowing about environmental justice or racism because they got an education in it, but because we have real lived experiences. That's how I came to environmental racism and to talk and learn about that. I learned about workers' rights as somebody who made the minimum wage before, right? I know, and I fight for public schools because I'm a product of public schools. I'm a product of schools that were not as well funded because of my zip code, right? When I think about so many of did I get booted out? Hold up. I got so much going on my computer, y'all.
You're there.
Just listen. This is the oldest thing I'm gonna ever do, right? Is like be on a computer and get sidetracked. But that is the point of when we think about what it means to have Black women. It's not just that Black women are going to come in with a fight that we haven't seen because we must fight for ourselves, but it's also that we come in with these experiences that truly should inform the way that we propose bills, the way that we oppose bills, the ways and who we're bringing to the table. The advocacy groups and the stakeholders will look different because we're different, because our lived experiences are different, and that makes our government more well-rounded. So that is the importance, I think, of seeing Black women, and just no one fights like Black women. No one advocates like Black women. And we don't want to keep it that way. By us being here, hopefully we're going to teach some other people to fight like a Black woman so that we are not in this fight for our democracy for any longer than hopefully this cycle.
So I love the fact that everybody so far has used the word perspective. And I want to really highlight that word as I answer this question, because in a government by, of, and for the people, government is only going to reflect the perspective of and therefore meet the needs of the people who participate. And for most of our country's history, the fight has been, how do we make the government by, of, and for the people actually reflect all of the people? That became really clear to me when I first got elected to office. I was a 32-year-old Black woman from the most Democratic district in Virginia, in a body that was mostly white Republican men over 50. And I very quickly learned that everybody's political views, how they vote on bills, how they approach bills, what they even think about when thinking about bills, is all based on their life experiences and what they know, just as Summer said. So as the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of domestic workers, I knew the value of domestic workers' work, but I also knew that they were exempted from the very worker protections that so many of us take for granted. And so I was able to pass the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights in Virginia. As a Black woman who nearly died in childbirth, I knew perfectly well all of the, it was more than just a number and a statistic about the number of Black. Sorry, I got a phone call in the middle of that. But I could to the policymaking table, and that's the importance of representation. That is the importance of this perspective, but it's also our histories aren't taught in school. So we bring those stories, the stories not just of my experiences, but my parents, my great-grandparents, my grandparents, to tell how over 300 years of slavery and Jim Crow, that still impacts our communities. And as we see this fight, on the teaching of our history and on diversity, equity, and inclusion, those stories and that perspective is even more important than ever.
And I actually want to touch on that for the three of you. You know, we're watching this historic assault on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But DEI is really a frame for a lot of things that people didn't actually even understand, right? You're seeing an assault on supporting and funding for institutions that have potentially Black fraternities, sororities, clubs for different groups. That includes Jewish student groups, that includes LGBTQ student groups, that includes Latino student groups, and the list goes on. And even questioning HBCUs. All of these assaults happening during Black History Month. And so, you know, a lot of young Americans, we work obviously with young people across the country. And we want to know from you is what advice do you give young people about how they defend Black history, Black culture, and pride that, in our opinion at NextGen, is American culture, history, and pride in this moment? How do we organize? What is at stake? And how do we organize in response? And would love to start with Congresswoman Lee and then Representative sorry, and then Mayor Gaskins, and then Congresswoman McClellan. Go ahead, Summer. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, I think the first thing that we all have to do is recognize that these attacks are not accidental. When we think about the change that we're seeing, the shifts that we're seeing in our society, right? We're talking about an era in American history where Black and brown folks, Latinos, queer and trans folks, poor and working class folks are reaching different heights. They have access to different institutions that are, you know, truly have been shut off to us for so long, right? And we're seeing these very same attacks at the exact same time that we've been seeing and we've been dealing with headwinds when it comes to our organizing, when it comes to our advocacy, to the justice work that we've been doing, right? This is a blowback on that. This is a blowback on, to be quite frank, right, white male America being afraid of having to play on an even playing field, right? Having to compete with people when they no longer have the advantages that they've systemically had, that we've had through policy, that we've had through legislation, that we've had legally, and that we've had in so many other ways. So first of all, recognize game, right? Why are they attacking these? Why are they doing it right now? The second of all is like recognizing where and why it's coming. And in the various ways that it is coming, right? It's not just going to look like, and you've mentioned so many of them, right? Attacks on Title I funded schools, the Department of Education, attacks on book bans, it'll look that way, right? Attacks on sports, who can play sports, who can participate in activities in schools. We already saw, you know, inequitably funded schools before these assaults, but we're going to see that ramp up, which means that we also have to be able to, again, recognize it and call it out. The second thing is we have to start to talk about how a diverse education, a diverse workforce isn't just a benefit to Black and brown folks, right? It's a benefit to everybody. When we think about who is benefited by a diversified curricula, a de-Euro-centralized curricula, it's not just Black kids. Having Black educators and brown educators, having Indigenous studies in their school, that makes a well-rounded American, a well-rounded student. Making sure that we're allowed to have, or that we're able to have Black and brown and disabled kids and queer and trans kids participate and find entryways into STEM, into tech, into space and robotics. These are the economies of the future. These are the ones that are going to keep us globally competitive. I used to ask questions in my hearings of NASA and NIST and all of these other scientific agencies. What does it mean to have a diversified workforce? And they all said the same thing, right? That if we are going to be our best selves, if we are going to be as competitive as America can be, then that means that we need that diversity of perspective, of experience, of culture, of race, of background. It means that we're tapping into all of the talent that we have in America. So right now, we're going to have to decide, right? Will we rather all be on a sinking ship? Or would we rather give out a lifeboat so that Black and brown Americans can participate and succeed too? And we all have a vested interest in that. So our organizing efforts are going to have to be around that we all have a vested interest. That diversity is not an affront to whiteness, to maleness, but instead it's a lifter up. It is a great equalizer of our society. I want to see people talk about that way. I want to see us not fall into the tropes, not fall into the categories, the boxes that Republicans and right-wing nationalists give us, but instead taking it, flipping it on its head, and reminding us that if America is going to survive, that it will only survive with all Americans on board.
Thank you so much. Mayor Gaskins, what is your perspective on this moment and how to respond?
Yeah. Well, I think Representative Lee said it best. We have to keep reminding ourselves that this is not accidental. Every single action, every single policy, everything that is rolled back and changed, it's all intentional. And I think how do we know that? Look at the way these attacks are being framed. I think everything I've been hearing and reading, they're trying to frame DEI as somehow reverse discrimination or reverse racism, which we all know, A, doesn't exist, but also every one of these programs has actually been created not in terms of discrimination, but actually a response to it, a response to helping each of us recognize our full potential and have the resources, the educational systems, the economic systems, the art system, all of these things around us that we deserve and that we have helped build and shape and should benefit from. I think when I think about our organizing and the work that needs to have, I guess the only thing I would add, in addition to sounding the alarm, in addition to continuing to be intentional about the implications of these attacks, I think sometimes we forget that our culture, our diversity, all of these things, our history, are things to be celebrated. There is a beauty in who we are as people. There is a beauty in our culture. There is a beauty in the things that we have contributed and will continue to contribute to our communities. And so I think part of the resistance should also bring in joy, beauty, dance, arts. I mean, look at kind of what's happening with some of the arts institutions here in DC and the things that are being rolled back and changed there. So I would say part of our movement also has to be a celebration that you, each of us is not somebody to be erased, but our Blackness, our beauty is something to be cherished and is part of what makes the better policy, makes the better program, and allows us to truly thrive as a community and as a country ultimately.
I love that so much, Mayor Gaskins. And, thinking just about how some of the most beautiful and rich things about our country come from the celebration of our diversity. And if that gets taken away, what a tragedy that is for our entire country. Representative McClellan, what's your perspective? You're in Congress fighting, you're seeing these attacks. What advice do you have for young people about how to respond to these moments if they're on a campus or a school or just in their community concerned about these attacks on themselves, people that they care about, the history and teaching that they're seeing at their schools?
To recognize we've been here before. Those that know me know that I'm a huge history nerd, and the history of our country has been every time we make progress in making the ideals upon which this country was founded true for everybody, there's a backlash. And that backlash involves three things: propaganda, violence, and voter suppression. And I'll spare you the history lesson. Just go read from the beginning. You'll see it yourself. But when you recognize that cycle, we are in the backlash right now. First, recognize that while we are fighting the same fights that our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents fought, we fight them from a position of more power than they ever dreamed of. My parents, Summer's parents, probably never dreamed they'd have children in Congress. Second, and you have more power than I had at your age, or that my parents had, or their parents. Second, use that power and recognize that every generation has to do its part. John Lewis said that in his final words to us, that democracy is not a state. It is an act that requires every generation to do its part to build the beloved community. Democracy in and of itself is not the goal, because democracy isn't and never has been and never will be perfect. It's what you do with it. And we won't be able to have it and we won't be able to use it if we don't each do our part and recognize we have power in our voice, we have power in our vote, and we have power in how we choose to use our dollars or who we choose to support. But first, recognize you can't do everything. You cannot fight every single battle. So pick what is the issue that is the most important to you and focus your energy there. If you try to do everything, you're going to exhaust yourself. Second, take the time to feel whatever you feel in the moment. I have moments, I had one today where I have a near full-on panic attack. about how much is happening in our country that is going to hurt, the people that I care about and the people that I represent. So I felt that in the moment, and then I took a deep breath and said, all right, let me focus on what I can control. If I focus on what I can control and try to let go of the rest, then that helps me move forward, and it helps me make a difference in fighting back against what is happening. So that's the best advice that I have for this moment. It's the same thing that our parents, our grandparents, and our great-grandparents had to do.
Yeah, I think that that's really important. Sometimes it can feel like this is the first time we're experiencing this. And there's so many assaults on our rights, our values, basic functions of government right now. And I think people are seeing like, man, I didn't even know my government did this, and this is going to be taken away and it's going to be impacted. And there's a lot of sometimes small policy nuances that people that don't pay attention or don't have the time or capacity to watch everything that happens in Congress. That's why we elect good people to go to Congress and represent us, who that is their job. I wanted you to break down, Congresswoman, a little bit about what happened last week with the House Budget Committee for folks that aren't as living it day to day as you are, and why we are proud to have you elected in office doing that for so many Americans. But the House Budget Committee passed a budget resolution that sets the stage for some pretty extreme things that will really assault the interests of working and middle class Americans. And I'm wondering if you could speak to what's at stake, why this is being done, and just break it down for us, because I think a lot of people don't know this is happening, which is totally fair given everything else that is happening. And maybe we can start with Congresswoman Lee.
Yeah. Just to remind ourselves that like we're working on, obviously, like we haven't passed last year's budget. We're still working on that one and continuing resolutions that come there. And we're also dealing with what is next fiscal year's budget and doing those at not just the same time, but also at a time of just intense chaos, intense, assaults on so many of the values, the things that we care about. So I think this budget that they're proposing is one of those moments where, when people say that we're catastrophizing or that we're, using hyperbole when we explain what Republicans' real agenda is. So what we saw last week and what we're expecting to see forward is a proposal that would just rip away healthcare. It would increase food costs. We saw them, the attacks on the Affordable Care Act. When I think about my own district, that's thousands upon thousands of people who would see their average premium go up, right? That's people who are 60 or older who would, also see their costs at a time where they're living on fixed incomes, at a time when they're worried about already the attacks on their Social Security or their Medicare or their Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, is something that would be on the line. A couple of weeks ago, when Trump tried to push through his illegal funding freeze that we're still litigating, that is not over yet. One of the things that happened was across the country, the Medicaid portals were shut down. And I wanted to come back and mention that very specifically, because even as he is saying, and sometimes his spokesperson says, no, we're not attacking Medicaid. Well, let me tell you, the House Republicans, the Senate Republicans, they have not gotten that message because Medicaid is on the chopping block for them. And that's remarkable because after the funding freeze, the one thing that happened was when we talk about power, reminding people that that's where power is vested inherently in the people in a true American democracy. We saw people actually exercise a little bit of that power, even if it unintentionally. When the Medicaid portal shut down across the country, we saw people, Democrat, Republican, urban, rural, suburban, all standing up and saying that they didn't want, hands off of their Medicaid, calling out the lies when the Trump administration went back and forth about whether Medicaid was even impacted by the funding freeze. And because of that, the American people put a parameter on the administration. They put a parameter on a guy who's stress testing the system to see what he can get away with. He sticks his toe over the line a little bit. And if we're true and if we're exercising our power, we have the power to push him back over. That was one of those occasions. But this budget is revisiting that. SNAP, WIC, CHIP, all of these programs that are incredibly important, not just for nutrition. We know that Medicaid, CHIP, children with disabilities in Title I schools. We're looking at threats to cuts to those schools. So those are all the things that were proposed in this budget. And I know, and you all know, the American people, whether they voted Republican or Democrat, this is not what we voted for. This is not what we want to see. I know people all over this country believe that their child deserves a quality education, a nutritious meal, believe that if you get sick, you should be able to go to the hospital. So these are the moments right now that we need to stand up against this right now. And I'm gonna hand it off to Jen.
So I'll take the why, because Summer did a good job of the what. But the why is, look, Donald Trump needs to find $4 to $6 trillion for permanent tax cuts for billionaires, the people that stood behind him when he took his oath of office, from Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and whoever else was up there. That's the why. And the why is that he wants to freeze the American workforce, the federal workforce. He wants to force people to resign so that they can be replaced with partisan folks that'll do his bidding. That's the why. That's all spelled out, was all spelled out in Project 2025. That's exactly what they're trying to do. But what they're figuring out is, if you notice, a lot of the agencies that they first started going after were agencies that Republicans don't like, that their base, they like to, throw some red meat around and get their base excited. But you're not going to find $2 to $6 trillion in NIH funding or in USAID funding. And so even though the president says, I'm not going after Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security, the House Republicans on the Budget Committee in the House and the Senate are going after all of those programs. That budget bill says to each of the committee chairs, here's the amount of savings cuts you have to find in your committee jurisdiction. And that's the why. And it's going to hurt not only the American people, but it's going to hurt our state and local governments as well.
Right. I know we're at time, and these are 3 incredibly busy women, but you all are an inspiration to so many other young people across the country that run for office. And obviously, running for office is not an easy thing to do. And it's definitely not set up for working class people. It's also not set up for working class people of color in particular. So what advice do you have for people that are listening about, that are interested in running for office, especially other young Black women that are listening? What advice do you have for them? And maybe we could start with Mayor Gaskins and finish with Representative Lee.
Sure. I did just want to say, picking up where we just left in the conversation, that just every one of these conversations and cuts happening at the federal level has a direct impact locally. So I have over 3,000 residents on TANF. I have 43,000 residents on Medicaid. I have over 18,000 residents on SNAP, and the list goes on and on and on. And your local governments that have to have balanced budgets, we can't absorb all of that impact. So every single one of these things, you are going to feel that in your housing, in your food, in your schools, when you walk down our street. So I just want to put that there, that if you weren't already fired up, if you look around your community and every single thing that you depend on, all of us are going to be fired up when we start seeing those things go away and recognize we don't have the systems to absorb it. I guess my advice to you would be, take that fire, take that energy. And while we are feeling exhausted, while it seems like there's a constant state of chaos, know that you were built for this moment. And the ideas you have are maybe ideas that no one else has thought about. So even if you're not ready to run for office today, I think you can start being a part of that conversation. Start reaching out and writing to your local elected officials. Start showing up. I mean, at least at the local level, you can come and testify this Saturday. You sign up and you can speak on any single issue you want and what it means to you and what you think should be done about it. I think there are a lot, especially in Virginia, I think almost everyone in the General Assembly is up. There are a lot of Democratic candidates who are going to need your support and have positions on their campaigns. So I guess my advice to you would be, if you feel in your heart this is something you want to do, don't let anyone silence your voice or say that you can't do it. Find those experiences, start getting them now, asking questions, getting curious, so that when you're ready to run, you've got your support system, your infrastructure, and your voice is out there and you're ready to go.
Yeah,
I would say,
real quick, I can piggyback right off of that. Taking all that, what the mayor already said, say you're already looking to run. My advice is always the same. It's to be you. We don't need you if you are, especially a Black woman, you a marginalized person, you're poor, you're working class, and you're running for office. Black folk, we don't need you to look like anybody else. We don't need you to run like the white man who was your predecessor. We don't need you to, if you are poor and working class, we don't need you to look like and move like and act like the wealthy folks who are already in office. They are very well represented. What we need is for you to come and bring your unique perspectives, your unique ideas. We need you to bring your accent. We need you to bring your dialect. We need you to bring your background. We need you to bring your culture, your flair, your swag. You can be that. What people want to see right now is that authenticity. They want to know that they are represented in government. And what that will do is it's going to make other people support you. It's going to make other people want to participate in government. And it's going to make them be able to react to it. Listen, we already got a gerontocracy, so we don't need you to act old. We got enough of people who are Black. We don't need you to act like anything else. So I think that is my thing, is to just be you. You don't have to change. It's a reflective democracy. Be your best version of you, but you don't have to be a single other person.
I would just add to that, know your why, be very clear on your why, and hold on to your why, because you are going to have moments where you get defeated. You're going to have moments where you're frustrated, where you wonder, can I do this? Is it worth doing this? And if you know your why and you're passionate about your why, then that'll be your North Star and will help you pick yourself back up. But do not be afraid to fail. I ran for governor in a primary and I lost. But having done that put me in a position that when this vacancy for Congress came open, I was ready to run, and I won. So do not be afraid to fail. You're going to fail at some point. Failure makes you stronger. Failure teaches you lessons that are valuable that you will need to succeed going forward. Do not be afraid of it.
That is an amazing way to end. The greatest fear is not failure. The greatest fear should be never trying, right? You'll never know if you're able to do it. And we are so grateful that you three, against very difficult odds, threw your name into the hat, and that we can now count on you to represent people in Virginia and Pennsylvania in the interests of working and middle-class Americans and people of color, all Americans. And we know you're doing the really critical work. Thank you for being points of inspiration for so many and for sharing your time with us. We're really grateful. Follow these three amazing elected women, Black women. You definitely want to make sure that you get to hear their opinion about every single issue that comes up, because you will be smarter, better, and stronger for it. Take care.